Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for August the 23rd, 2023, and we are just 10 days away from Carolina football, and there's probably no more Saturdays without college football until January. That ought to make you happy. Week 0 gets underway. There we go. This weekend. So very excited about that. I think the one game that I am looking forward to is probably not on your bingo card. I don't know. Maybe it is. But for me, it's UTEP at Jacksonville State at 5:30 on the CBS Sports Network. That's because later this year, there will be Gamecocks versus Gamecocks. Jacksonville State will play South Carolina for the first time in college football. Very, very excited about that. Today was my daughter's first day in 4th grade, and so wishing Addison a great day as she begins her journey in a new school year, and thankfully in the classroom. All right, so with it being 10 days to kick off, Gary Harper, probably for me, the best number 10. And that was because all he had to do was either hand it off or turn it and pitch it to George Rodgers. Not the best passer in the world. Obviously, the Clemson game in 1980 brought that out, but Harper led the Gamecocks in 1979 and 1980 to back-to-back 8-win seasons. So cheers to Gary Harper, who I believe is either a pastor or a retired minister in the upstate. All right, so let's jump into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines real quick. Brad Crawford, 247Sports college football writer, will join the show momentarily. Jump in the Nana's Porch chat box. Leave your questions. If you have some good ones, we'll ask Brad. Of course, our news, notes, and headlines brought to you by Nana's Porch, a full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area, award-winning catering company. Whether it is a banquet, a wedding, or a corporate event, or a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. You want to bring in a food trailer, Nana's Porch voted among the top 3 food trailers, according to a local newspaper poll in the Charlotte area. And as we all know, their pimento cheese voted numero uno in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. Go to nanasporch.com. Of course, they will be providing the meal at the Carolina Rise tailgate in the shadow of Bank of America Stadium. Expecting to see up to a couple of hundred of my favorite Gamecocks and friends. I will be there, and there could be some very special guests as well. All right, so today was supposed to be Daniel Hill Day, the 6'2", 220-pound running back from Meridian, Mississippi, was expected to choose South Carolina over Alabama and Tennessee. Yesterday, he decided to pump the brakes and hold off on that decision. I still think the Gamecocks are in good shape, but there is a family member that really wants to see him stay closer to home and play at Alabama. But the depth chart there is very concerning. So Tennessee getting back in the mix. And so, look, South Carolina already has one 4-star running back committed in Matthew Fuller, who had 280 yards and 4 touchdowns in his season opener. Certainly you would love to add Daniel Hill. But let me ask you this. In August, would you rather have a 4-star running back from Meridian, Mississippi committed, or consensus 5-star defensive end Dylan Stewart? For me, I'll take Stewart every day of the week. He's a headliner of the class. South Carolina has never had a 5-star commit this early and be able to be one of the lead recruiters in the class. I really don't think South Carolina will have a problem landing another running back and filling out their class. Lots of good things are going on. All right, since we were with you last week, South Carolina has announced the addition of graduate transfer Drew Tuazama from UAB, 6'5", 265 pounds. He will provide depth at a critical position of need. He practiced over the weekend. He's still ramping up. Shane Beamer did say he expected Tuazama to play against North Carolina. We'll see. Shane Beamer, very optimistic, said he expected Juice Wells, Nicholas Harbor, all those guys to play. I don't know. Right now, the coordinators are meeting with the media. After we bring in Brad Crawford, which will be right now, we will be joined by 247Sports National College Football writer Brad Crawford, and go ahead and bring him into this conversation. Later, I'll give you my depth chart preview, and we'll have some news and notes and quotes from the coordinators. Brad, how you doing? Are we on a countdown? When is the baby coming, or is it still a mystery like it often always is?
So the due date is September 2nd, which every Gamecock fan knows is the season opener against UNC. So the next doctor's appointment is tomorrow morning, and we're either going to schedule an induction or go one more week and see if it happens on September 2nd. But my first 2 girls were born at or around their due date, and we're expecting this little young lady to be the same.
Well, being a girl dad is definitely only for the most special people. God reserves that for men that know how to treat a lady.
Amen.
And know how to raise a girl. And I'm a girl dad. My daughter starts 4th grade today.
Awesome.
And today's also one of the more famous girl dads. I think he coined the phrase, the late, great Kobe Bryant. Today would have been his 45th birthday. Gone way too soon.
One of my favorite players, man.
No doubt. All right, so Brad, let's jump right in here. Thanks so much for taking time to be with us. And so I want to get your key takeaways from Shane Beamer's press conference. My key takeaway is Beamer has mastered the art of talking a lot while saying very little.
Yeah, going into year 3 as an SEC head coach, man, he's already a 10-year seasoned vet with just talking to, media members and press conferences about preseason depth charts and injury reports. The million-dollar question is, will Juice Wells play against UNC? I don't even think Shane knows that right now. He's going by what Juice tells him. Shane said he didn't practice on Tuesday, but he was out there with the team catching balls. So that means whatever kind of lower body injury he's dealing with right now, he's trying his best to work through it here about a week and a half before the opener. But I thought Shane's most pointed comments were about his offensive line. And here we are 10 days from the season opener, and he still doesn't have a starting 5 right now. They're still working through that. And to be honest with you, I think we're going to see 5 players walk out there with 3 of them being transfer additions. And if you told me 8 months ago, man, that 3 of the Gamecocks' 5 offensive line starters would have been from Western Illinois, Charlotte, and Yale, I probably would have laughed. And, here we are close to game week, and that's probably going to be the case.
I mean, that would appear to be the case. I know JC has a great source on that. I've talked to a couple people.
Yeah.
I still think they're juggling guys, and I don't think we'll know until they actually walk out there. And I kind of think that's the way Dowell Loggins and Shane Beamer want it to be.
Yeah.
I think they want a lot of mystery to this offense because you have tape of Chip Lindsey running college offense. There is 0 tape on Dowell Loggins running college offense. NFL offense, plenty of tape there. And so, in your opinion, do you expect Juice Wells to play? For me, he's a 50-50 at best and a maybe.
Yeah, I think Shane hit it on the head when he initially mentioned, before going in depth about it, that he would consider Juice questionable. Now, in the NFL, you and I watch pro football. Questionable means likely not going to play. So that's where I would lean right now. I haven't confirmed if it's indeed a foot injury. That's what I've been told. So to me, I think he's getting ready. They're developing him, getting him ready for the SEC opener a couple of weeks from now against Georgia. That would be the game I think that Juice has to play in for the Gamecocks to have a chance. But, Juice being out, that being said, it's given a lot more guys opportunity. Elijah Caldwell's a guy during fall camp who I'm sure you've been told as well has really looked good. He's going to play early as a first-year player for the Gamecocks. Nicholas Harbor right now is dealing with a shoulder injury, I think. He's probably going to play against UNC. Not going to be in that starting lineup, but he should get some reps. And then Trey Knox is the 3rd guy that was on that injury report. I think he's good to go. Shane said he missed 2 practices. He's been almost full strength since, and he's just wearing a brace on that knee as a precaution. So I'm excited to see what the Gamecocks bring to the table offensively, man, especially in that wide receiver and tight end room. Those are 2 positions I think that the coaching staff right now feels really good about.
I mean, today, if I had to make a bet, my starting lineup would be 12 personnel with Trey Knox, Joshua Simon, Amarian Brown, and Xavier Leggett, and then DeCarrion Joyner beside of Rattler in the shotgun. I think we know those guys, and I think we know who the 3 interior guys are probably going to be, although, if they decide to slide Ja'Kai Moore back out to left tackle, then that moves Nick Gargiulo from right guard back to left guard. And Vershawn Lee, I think he's certain to start at center. And if Gargiulo's at left guard, that probably means Trey Jones is at right guard.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned the 12 personnel. That's exactly what Mike Bobo is going to run this season at Georgia. With twin tight ends, Brock Bowers, has a new quarterback in Carson Beck. So, yeah, and that's a pro-style look. So I do think Dowell Loggins, we're going to see some twin tight end sets. But, yeah, that offensive line right now, Nick Gargiulo is a guy that, he's recently new stepping on campus and is already a leader inside that offensive line room. I don't know what that says about some of the returning guys, but that tells me about Nick that, you know, he's ready to come in there, start as a multi-year starter at a previous program. But, man, we know the SEC is a different beast. And when those lights come on at, you know, Panther Stadium on September 2nd, that's going to be very interesting to see which 5 Shane Beamer and Dow Loggins throw out there to protect Spencer Rattler.
No doubt. Well, I mean, there's been a lot talked about this Gamecock offense. Obviously, Spencer Rattler, the relationship with Loggins, how dialed in he is. You know, we could get into the quarterback stuff. Everybody's talked about that. I want to know what your sources are saying about the South Carolina defense and what do you expect in year 3 under Clayton White?
Yeah, I've read some message board stuff about, you know, the cornerback play won't be as good as Darius Rush and the guys last year. I disagree with that. I think O'Donnell Fortune and Marcellus Dial are more than ready to assume those everyday starting roles, especially on 3rd down. And those 2 corners are going to have some help with DQ Smith and Nick Emanwari. Emanwari is a guy that I've compared in the past to Mark Barron, former All-American at Bama. I think they're very similar in stature, you know, not afraid to stick his face in the fan against the run. And Nick's a guy who's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder because he was not on any preseason All-SEC teams, coaches or media, which I just found shocking, you know, despite being one of the nation's leading tacklers as a true freshman last season. So secondary, I expect to be very good for South Carolina. Obviously, it all starts up front with that pass rush. Several new portal guys have been added. Jataeus Gear, he might have tweaked his ankle a little bit Saturday night in the scrimmage, but I think he's going to be one of the edge starters. Obviously, Jordan's going to probably be another one. Just got the guy from UAB who Shane Beamer said is going to suit up and play. How wild is that, man? You step on campus 2 weeks before the season opener, and you're probably going to be in the 2 deep. That just shows the necessity for pass rushers. And then at linebacker, you know, who's going to be the starters? I think if Pup Howard was fully healthy right now, he'd probably be out there as a true freshman starter. But Stone Blanton's been there a couple of years. He's going to probably be one of the starters. And Debo Williams, he's a thumper. He hits harder than probably anybody the Gamecocks have had on defense here in a couple of years. So I'm looking forward to seeing number 0 out there chasing guys against the Tar Heels.
So, Brad, what have you heard about the health of Mo Kaba? Because to me, he's really a critical piece for this defense. I know they're ramping him back up. Jordan Strong probably ahead of him in his recovery process, but my sources indicate Kaba played more in the second scrimmage, really looked good, is rounding back into shape. Yep. And I know peeping at the comments, Clayton White publicly feels really good about the depth at the linebacker spot. And I'm with you. I think Pup Howard, his injury slowing him, he needs to be out there sooner rather than later. I think that's one of the young players that Beamer has really been talking about that needs to play at South Carolina. Yeah,
the linebacker position really hasn't had a full impact player since probably Sky Moore several years ago. And this is a unit that needs to play well for the Gamecocks collectively as a unit on defense to, you know, be one of the top tier SEC defenses behind the likes of Georgia, Bama, and some of those teams. I think Mo Kaba has, like you said, sort of taken it easy those first 10 to 12 practices and then was sort of unleashed on Saturday night because like any player, especially at linebacker coming back from a repaired knee, he's going to be favoring that. And I think it took a while for Mo to kind of get the cobwebs out of his head and just play full bore and not worry about a knee situation. I've been told that he's playing pain-free, which is good. You know, he just has to play without favoring that knee, which is something that it's more mental than physical right now with Mo Kaba, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I mean, normally that's the biggest hurdle for guys in their recovery is trusting that knee, being able to cut without thinking about it. And so I really think he's key. So my sources seem to indicate that these young secondary players behind the starters.
Kilgore, yeah.
Jalen Kilgore. I don't know who the starting nickel's going to be. Maybe it's Keenan Nelson, David Spalding if he's healthy. But I've been told, and I think sooner rather than later, maybe by the end of September, Jalen Kilgore may just be too good to keep off the field, and they slide DQ Smith back up to nickel, and Nick Emanwari and Jalen Kilgore are your starting safeties.
Yeah, there's really 6 or 7 guys, those starting 4 and then 3 or 4 others that Shane Beamer and Clayton White really like and have really shown out. Vicari Swain's another guy who I think can play some meaningful snaps this season. But Kilgore's a guy that has shown during fall camp he's ready to play SEC football already. And as you mentioned, I've heard the same about him. I think you're going to see him on the 2 deep when Shane releases the depth chart probably early next week for UNC. And they're very comfortable right now at both cornerback spots. Like you said, though, at nickel, it's kind of a multiplayer competition right now. Nickel's one of the positions that Beamer alluded to during the presser yesterday, along with offensive line, defensive line, and then running back behind DK Joyner as running back 1. Those are kind of the positions that are still yet to be decided. So David Spalding has played. He's had some big plays already in his career, and I think you're going to see him get most of the reps at that position.
I would agree. So back up front, I just have a feeling Tonka Hemingway is going to start at defensive end. Travian Robertson, who played with Melvin Ingram, who played for Brad Lawing on the greatest defensive lines in South Carolina history. At the Birdies with Beamer, Travian Robertson compared Tonka Hemingway to Melvin Ingram. And that was the key takeaway to me, because that is high praise, no doubt about it. He played out of necessity at defensive end in the bowl game, but early in his career, he was a defensive end. You can tell he's slimmed back down. I think on first down, maybe second down, he's at defensive end. Then I think you're going to see Travian do just what Brad Lawing did, was slide him inside and bring in a gear or another edge rusher and go with a rabbits package, because Tonka Hemingway inside, he's just too quick with his initial burst and is really disruptive in there.
At his best, Tonka Hemingway is a bull rusher, and that's what I like to call Melvin Ingram. He might not have been sexy with his hand-to-hand combat moves at the line of scrimmage, but he just ran through guys, and he had really quick feet despite, that stature he played at South Carolina. And the good news for Tonka is it took Melvin Ingram 3 or 4 seasons to get to that heightened All-American plateau that he reached as a senior. And, Tonka's been there a couple of years now, and I think he's a guy who could certainly have a breakout performance on that D-line. Travian Robertson, I was texting back and forth with one of the Gamecock staffers a few weeks ago. Since he arrived on campus, they said he's been the most impactful assistant coach that Shane Beamer's hired here in his first couple of years in Columbia. I mean, just as far as teaching technique, he's getting guys on the field that want to be out there, that show the most heart, toughest grit. In the SEC, man, you have to have that in the trenches. And the Gamecocks in recent years maybe haven't been as good on the D-line as the talent they've signed suggests. So I think Robertson's a guy who's going to get the most out of that pass rush this season. And you have to like what the Gamecocks have added in the portal, despite losing 2 starters off last season's edge rush.
I mean, I totally agree. I've heard it since day one. And I think South Carolina is getting basically Brad Lawing back in his prime.
Yeah.
But as a 6'4", probably still 295-pound former All-SEC player who played in the SEC championship game and in the NFL. I think, Jimmy Lindsey, I thought he did a nice job, but I don't think he fully maximized the potential
right
of a guy like Zach Pickens. I mean, you look at him with the Bears, he looks like he's 15 or 20 pounds lighter and much more explosive. I think he got about 85 to 90%. I think Travian is pushing the envelope with those guys. And with talented guys like TJ Sanders, Nicholas Barrett, Boogie Huntley, Elijah Davis, and true freshman Xavier McLeod, there's a reason Georgia really wanted him. I think South Carolina's defensive line could be a big key to helping Clayton White turn around that run defense this year.
And that could be a huge storyline coming out of the season opener next weekend in Charlotte. I mean, if they're able to neutralize what Chip Lindsey, UNC's new offensive coordinator, wants to do on the ground, then we're talking about being able to pin its ears back as a defense and really get after Drake May. I said earlier this afternoon on another show that I like the Gamecock secondary against UNC's wideouts, especially if Tez Walker doesn't play. But it all starts at the line of scrimmage. If Travian Robertson can get those D tackles to just create havoc, you don't have to have sacks, just create havoc and make Drake May, play off rhythm, then that's going to wind up being a really good scenario for Gamecocks defense in that first game.
So, Brad, before we let you go, what do you anticipate? Preview North Carolina for us. Obviously, everybody talks about Drake May. I'm just not buying the hype on UNC. I've had too many sources close to that program that, that old Texas mentality of Mac being the, kind grandpa has just softened the culture there. And while I love Drake May, he probably should have made a different business decision, in my opinion. But
I'm with you there.
He chose to stay at North Carolina. Chip Lindsey's been a journeyman. Last year, Drake May was their leading rusher and passer. I think a big key just for South Carolina is not allowing Drake May to hurt them with his legs.
I think the wrong team is ranked in this matchup, if I'm being honest with you. The Gamecocks are underrated right now from a national media standpoint. UNC is inside the top 25 because they have a first-round quarterback in next year's draft. But I'm with you. I see UNC as a 7-5 type football team this season because outside of Drake May, there's no one on that roster that really scares you besides two senior linebackers. Linebackers, the only other position I think UNC has right now an advantage over South Carolina. But the million-dollar question, heading into next Saturday night is Tez Walker, the Kent State wide receiver transfer, had a huge season last year, expected to be a 12 to 1,300-yard guy for Drake May this season. If he's not eligible, if the NCAA does not, grant his waiver request, then we're talking about a fresh look of UNC receivers that are largely unproven because you remember Josh Downs, an all-ACC guy last year, he's off that team. So there's a few new starters up front for Drake May. This is a new offense. It's not going to be the air raid pass heavy that it was last season under Phil Longo. He's at Wisconsin now. So not only are the Gamecocks going to look a lot different with Dowell Loggins calling the shots, his first game as a college play caller, by the way, but UNC's offense is going to look very different too, despite having whom I consider one of the, college football's best passers.
No doubt. So last question before we let you go. Have you got a name picked out for your new daughter?
As long as my mom and dad aren't watching this, I'll go ahead and share it because we have kept it under wraps. But Allison Shea, so she would join Caroline and Hattie, and we're going to call her Allie. Yep.
I like it. Caroline was my mom's middle name.
It's a great name.
No doubt. Well, hey, Brad, great stuff as always. Always appreciate you coming in, and hopefully, you'll be in the delivery room. Maybe you'll be able to get to a TV to catch that game. But
I'm gonna have to wheel a 70-inch TV from home, man, and bring it in there because I can't deal with a 13-inch scrambled up TV.
Well, maybe she'll surprise you and come a couple days early, so you be able to get home.
Maybe so.
And, be in your chair holding your baby watching the Gamecocks take down the Tar Heels. All the best to you and the family, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Hey, good to hear from you, buddy. Talk soon.
All right. That was Brad Crawford from 247 Sports, talking Gamecocks and Tar Heels. We'll be right back after this commercial message.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, welcome back into Gamecock Pod Live, now available on every platform where you get your podcasts: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. And next week, we will be launching an exclusive sponsor for online betting as the official sponsor of Gamecock Pod Live every Wednesday for September. And so tune in for that announcement next week. All right, so great stuff there from Brad Crawford as always. We like to get him in and out. He's a very busy man. We could have spent the entire hour talking Gamecock football with him. And so one of the things we didn't talk about, one of the things really nobody's talking about that's really going to be critical to South Carolina's success is special teams. South Carolina is one of the few teams in the country that return all their key special team guys. I mean, you've got probably, well, definitely, in my opinion, the premier punter in the SEC and all of college football in Kai Kroger. I don't know who was named AP first team All-American over him. He was named to the second team, but 6'4", 212, left-footed punter and a weapon with his arm. He's never thrown an incomplete pass. He has multiple touchdowns and 2-point conversion attempts. He's unbelievable. Mitch Jeter, who did not miss a single field goal last year. There were a couple of snap issues. Kai Kroger, probably also the best holder in all of college football. I think that does not get talked about enough. And Hunter Rogers, your snapper, he's back. Okay. Also, your kickoff return man, Xavier Leggett, is back. DeCarian Joyner could be involved in that. He's had some explosive returns. Of course, we all remember Leggett taking it to the house. That took the top off of Williams-Brice Stadium against Texas A&M last year. That was huge. Okay. And then your punt returner, you've got a very experienced guy in Eddie Lewis, who is very similar to Josh Vann. He was Memphis punt returner last year. He was all AAC as a punt returner, very experienced. And then you have Amarian Brown, who had one of the biggest plays of the Clemson game, picking up a short punt on a bounce and returning it over 30 yards to set the Gamecocks up to score a touchdown on their first possession of the second half. So very excited about Gamecock special teams. And then when you add in all these young athletes at tight end, at wide receiver, at defensive back, at linebacker, okay, you are bringing a lot more speed to your coverage units. You're bringing a lot more athleticism. And I can't wait to see what Pete Limbaugh, who's the best special teams coach in America, chooses to do with special teams this year, because, look, that is Beamer Ball 2.0. Special teams have made a big difference. Block kicks last year in that season opener against Georgia Southern, when, you know, Captain Dumbass couldn't pick a play out of a hat for Spencer Rattler. The offense was stalled. Don't anticipate that with Dowell Loggins. So appreciate the kind words on the interview with Brad. Always good. I think we have pretty good chemistry. And so in the Nana's Porch chat box, Craig, as of today, and I'm going to run down my depth chart, but first, let's get just a few quotes from the coordinators. So Dowell Loggins was up first, and so one of the big things with him, he will be up in the press box calling plays. I really like that, especially when you have a veteran quarterback. I think it gives you a better perspective. I mean, Spencer Rattler does not need Dowell Loggins to be down there to babysit him, to hold his hand. This is a confident dude. This is a guy that came back. He's locked in universally. Their relationship, he can be on the headset. Dowell Loggins brought in a guy as a quarterback analyst who can be down on the field, okay, who has coached in the National Football League, has been a quarterback coach. So I think Loggins being up in the press box is good. Look, Loggins, you know, because of the directive from Shane Beamer, they're going to talk as much as they can without really telling you a whole lot. He does mention Omega Blake and his consistency. That has been a big theme. I would anticipate, just like Brad, I don't think we see Juice Wells until Georgia. I think you go with a lot of 12 personnel, and when you go with 3 wide receivers, you bring in Omega Blake. We'll get to the depth chart projection in just a couple of minutes. And so obviously you like him. Loggins says Luke Doty is one of the favorite players that he's ever coached because of his leadership qualities, because of his unselfishness, him mentoring younger players like Lenora Sellers. I mean, we didn't really get into it because I really wanted to get Brad's take on stuff that not everybody is asking him. right? Like every interview, it's about the Gamecock offense. It's about Spencer Rattler. It's about Lenore Sellers, Nicholas Harbor. I think Luke Doty right now is the number 2 quarterback, but I also think we will see him at wide receiver some this year as well. And I do think because Lenore Sellers is just a completely different animal from everybody else in that quarterback room. 6'3", almost 245 pounds, legitimate 4.41 speed in the 40. Okay, on the GPS, the catapult system, over 22 miles an hour. He's fast. He's big. Size-wise, running-wise, I don't know if he will be as physical as a true freshman as KJ Jefferson, but I think the potential is certainly there for that. No doubt about it. So those are really some of the highlights on tomorrow's show. We'll have the best of the Q&A with all the coordinators. We call it the quick hitters, the coordinator quick hitters. Of course, Pete Limbaugh, we got his opening statement. So Pete Limbaugh, my bad. Y'all know my upper or lower Pickens County education comes in there. Clayton White says they're excited about Drew Tuizama coming over. With Tuizama, they want him to feel comfortable in the system, and he's already in the playbook. But because he is an older guy, and I didn't mention this with Brad, but I mean, this is a guy that's like 24 years old, okay? He played high school football, then he was a year in prep school. Then he spent 2 years at Syracuse. So that was probably 19 before he enrolled in college. So 2021, then he went to East Mississippi Junior College, 22. UAB's 23 now this year. He's 24 years old. Okay, this is not his first rodeo, and quite frankly, playing defensive end is not that complicated. All right, he's been doing it a long time. And so I could see him maybe being that big defensive end behind Tonka Hemingway. And when South Carolina goes into a sub package, you could see him and Tonka Hemingway inside, and Jordan Strong and JT Gear or Brian Thomas rushing the passer. I don't think that's too far-fetched. So we'll see there. Clayton White still fired up about the linebackers. They've had a very good camp diagnosing plays, not just being big hitters. He does mention Debo Williams and Stone Blanton have taken huge steps. Mo Kaba getting better every day, working back to becoming his old self. I think 10 days out, those are probably your top 3. Then is it Bam Martin Scott? Is it Pup Howard? I think by the end of September, it will be Pup Howard. Game 1, maybe it's Bam Martin Scott and then Pup Howard. I also think in a sub package, you could see South Carolina bring Pup Howard in to rush off the edge. I'm still not concerned or convinced he won't be a defensive end one day, quite frankly, like Melvin Ingram, who was a big linebacker when he came out of high school. All right, so, they have a ton of really smart DBs, plenty of guys that can play nickel. Says Rattler has really been challenging to go against. Says he's an unbelievable dude. And so you have that right now. as well. So Clayton White understands he's on the clock, all right, stopping the run. He gets it, says that has been their Achilles heel. The biggest thing is improved tackling. I do think this will be the most athletic group of linebackers at South Carolina since you had Sky Moore, TJ Brunson, and Ernest Jones. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Said they're glad to have JT Gear on the defense. He can play both defensive ends. Glad he's come home. I think, you'll see him a lot. If Tonka Hemingway is inside with Boogie Huntley, then I do think it'll be Jordan Strong and JT Gear. All right, Pete Limbo. He mentions a lot of young walk-ons are starting to develop and chisel out special teams roles. Bakari Swain, another guy that could be a kickoff return guy. Tyshawn Russell's dynamic qualities as a returner. Elijah Caldwell, a natural. I think we'll see that. And so lots of guys. Punt returner is by committee. Amarian Brown, Eddie Lewis, as I said. Jalen Kilgore, though, a guy that was dynamic in high school as a wide receiver, just like Bakari Swain. Juju McDowell, I like him better at kickoff return. But they've got a lot of guys and a lot more speed and athleticism than they've had at any point in the Beamer era. And that's because of recruiting, which is the lifeblood of any program. All right, so to end the show, so a lot of great comments. I agree with Matt. Ernest Jones was definitely an impact linebacker. And I thought Brunson, his senior year, I think you had those two guys together. And so I definitely like what those guys brought to the table. You can't fault Ernest Jones for going early. He's the starting linebacker. He played in a Super Bowl. He's got a Super Bowl ring. So good stuff there. Craig talks about seeing Omega Blake in person. BRC saying Tuazama completely changes the outlook on the D-line. I agree on the edge, but I think there's another guy that, because of his injury history, and not just the shoulder and the legs, but also some concussions, Tyreek Johnson, who will wear number 10 this year, along with Amarian Brown, 10 days away from Carolina football. I think he will add an extra dimension. And so I do think that position is a lot better now than we thought it was going to be, even without Jordan Burch. I'm not of the belief that losing Burch and Edmond was no big deal. No defensive end in the Southeastern Conference last year had more tackles than Jordan Burch. Gilbert Edmond was a high ceiling guy. He was only 20 years old last year. And his athleticism, he is a freak athlete. I like the addition of JT Gear. If they go strictly with two edge guys, I think it's Jordan Strong and JT Gear. I like having Hemingway, though, because maybe you want to limit Jordan Strong because of the knee. All right, so quickly, let's go down our depth chart. We'll start on offense. I think at tight end, like I said, I'm anticipating two tight ends being starters, Trey Knox and Joshua Simon. I think Nick Elksness is the next guy. I think he's probably the best inline blocking tight end, and then Connor Cox. Reed McKeska has been slowed by injury, so I think it'll take a few weeks for him. Don't sleep on Mo Brown and Lucas Voza. Both of those guys are quality additions as preferred walk-ons. As of today, I'm going to say, we'll roll with Jackson Hughes at left tackle. Other than Ja'Kai Moore, he started more games than anybody else on the roster. Left guard, Ja'Kai Moore, the way he ended the season. Matt, I'm going to agree with you. I do think the tight end room is much better than it was a year ago. Why in the world it took Captain Dumbass until, week 11 to figure out how to use Nate Atkins was just another reason why I'm glad he's at Nebraska now, even though I feel sorry for Husker Nation because that's one of my favorite teams of all times. So I'm going to say this, okay? Tree Babalade may be your backup left tackle. I think in the game, if Jackson Hughes has to go out, they'll either move Ja'Kai Moore out there or they'll flip Big Sidney Fugar from right tackle to left tackle, and they'll bring in Tyshawn Wanamaker at right tackle. Vershawn Lee is definitely going to be the center. If he went down, they would probably slide Nick Gargiulo in there and bring in Trey Jones at right guard. But the starting line, Jackson Hughes left tackle, Ja'Kai Moore left guard, Vershawn Lee at center, Nick Gargiulo at right guard, Sidney Fugar or Tyshawn Wanamaker at right tackle. I do think Fugar could still be in the mix at left tackle with the big tree. BRC, I'm right with you. I definitely feel very confident in those interior three guys. And, Nick Gargiulo has been a big leader, but when we heard from Lonnie Teasley and from some of the other players, they really talked about Vershawn Lee taking over that offensive line group and being a leader. And so having captain, I believe, 149 of the Yale football team and Vershawn Lee, I think you've got two great leaders there on the offensive line. Obviously, at wide receiver, I don't anticipate Juice Wells playing, but when healthy, if South Carolina is in a 3 wide receiver look, it will be Juice Wells and outside Amarian Brown in the slot and Xavier Legette on the opposite side as the outside receiver. Probably in week 1 and week 2 in a 3 wide receiver look, it will be Omega Blake in Juice Wells' spot. Okay, the other wide receivers, I think Eddie Lewis, Elijah Caldwell. So those would be the top 6. If you had Juice Wells, Amarian Brown, Xavier Legette, Omega Blake, Eddie Lewis, Elijah Caldwell. I do think a couple of walk-ons. Joseph Morris has had a great fall camp, as well as Peyton Mangrum, my guy from Eastside High School, the first Gamecock to be a factor, maybe, if he is a factor, since Andre Goodman, and before him, Paul Vogel, who was, along with James Seawright, started on the Black Magic 1984 team. In the secondary for week 1, I'm with Brad. You hear great things about Marcellus Dial stepping into that number one corner spot. O'Donnell Fortune, a veteran. At the nickel, David Spalding or Keenan Nelson Jr., Nick Emanwari and DQ Smith at safety, but I do think there could be times when Kilgore comes in and you slide DQ Smith down to the nickel. I think that could happen sooner rather than later. The backup corners right now, Judge Collier, a true freshman from Rock Hill. Okay, went to a charter school up there, 6'1", 190, runs sub 4.5, was an early enrollee and another great evaluation by Torian Gray. And Emory Floyd, redshirt freshman out of the Atlanta area. Okay, that will allow Vakari Swain to potentially play some wide receiver and be a punt or kick returner. I personally have always thought his best spot was wide receiver, and so I'm kind of fired up about that. We'll see down the road where he plays. I think, like I said, Kilgore at safety, and then Peyton Williams, and then there's a pair of veteran walk-ons that Torian Gray trusts in BJ Gibson and King Dominion Ford. Those guys could factor in. You know, there's always, Peyton Williams and Kawan Banks who can play corner, nickel, or safety. And so there's a lot of options in the secondary. Obviously, to finish out the offense, at quarterback, we know it's going to be Spencer Rattler. I do think Luke Doty is the backup, but I think there could be the package there. Then you've got DeCarrion Joyner at running back, Juju McDowell, second team. I think Mario Anderson is probably the next guy right now, but by the end of September, it could be DJ Braswell. And I think along with Juju McDowell, you could see Loggins use those guys in a number of different ways, particularly if they are in a bear raid offense, meaning browse and air raid. All right, so lots of good stuff on the depth chart. I'm still thinking Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, Boogie Huntley, and Jordan Strong in the opener. Blanton and Debo Williams or Mokaba. Like I said, at corner and the secondary, we talked about that. So this team has got a lot of players over or under 65 yards in game one. Craig, I'm going with the over. Is that rushing and receiving? Because I think we could see some swing passes. And I think the combined yards running, receiving, and passing for DeCarrion Joyner in the opener could be over 100. So we'll see. But I do think there is a lot to feel good about this team. I wish the offensive line was settled. Maybe it is. Maybe there's a lot of gamesmanship going on. Like I said, I do think they want a lot of mystery and intrigue. Kind of the Austin Powers international man of mystery and intrigue about the offense, and as much surprise as they can in this opening game. But here's the bottom line. And I'll talk about this next week more, and we'll get the mybookie.ig official line on the game and our picks for week one. I think South Carolina is the more physical football team. I agree with Brad. I think the wrong team is ranked. I think it's all about Drake May. I'm not sure Tez Walker is going to get that waiver. He was a double transfer. I mean, we can go back to Jalen Brooks, okay? He was at Tarleton State during the pandemic. They didn't even play, and he was not eligible in the first game. And if it was really about him being closer to home, why do you take the official visit to Rutgers? Okay. So in the best interest of national TV, you want Juice Wells and Tez Walker in this game. I agree with that. But I probably think Tez Walker has a better chance of playing than Juice Wells, but we will see. Maybe it is a shell game and he will be ready, but I'm not convinced. All right, so that is going to be a wrap for today's Gamecock Pod Live. Appreciate everybody tuning in on YouTube. This will be up on all the podcast platforms in just a little bit, and we'll be tweeting out the link to the video. So until tomorrow, when we go through the best of the quick hitter Q&As with the coordinators and run down all the team news, this is Keith Alsep for special guest Brad Crawford saying, God bless, go Gamecocks, and I will be back tomorrow. If it's Thursday, it will be Gamecock Pod Daily in podcast form. Good day, everybody.